Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone this afternoon for being here. Notice this is hereby given of a workshop of the Board of Directors of the District to be held at 105 Fort Road, Port Isabel, Texas, on the 13th day of June, 2018, at the hour of 4 p.m. in accordance with the business of the agenda below. This notice is posted at the office of the District on June 7th, 2018, at 1:35 p.m. in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code 551041, 551050. We do have the presence of a quorum. All members of the board are present at this time. Let me please have everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Heavenly Father, Jesus Christ, for your blessed name, let us have a good meeting, and just allow us to hear your teachings and the knowledge of the thanks in Jesus Christ.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, presentation by Wilden Financial Services 2018 Water and Wastewater Rate Study and Long-Term Financial Plan Follow-Up. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Dan Jackson with Wilden Financial Services. We're the company that has had the privilege of being the district's water and wastewater rate consultants for the past 20-plus years. And we were engaged earlier this year to do a long-term water and wastewater rate study and financial plan for the district. You all will recall that a month ago I gave the initial presentation to you on the findings of the rate study. It's a lot of information. These studies can be fairly complicated, and further made so by the fact that some of the alternatives that we were looking at involve some changes in the way you bill some of your customers. So as is typical in a study of this nature, it's important for you to get a first look at this information, get a chance to review it, think about it, go over it, and then we do a follow-up presentation, not only to answer any additional questions you have at this time, but also maybe to go over the numbers again and help resolve any outstanding issues. We have completed the draft report. Can I get a copy? We've completed a copy of the draft report, so everything I tell you is put in excruciating detail in this particular report itself. The presentation I have, PowerPoint presentation, you've seen most of these slides before, so I'll go through many of the preliminary ones pretty quickly so that we can get to the meat and potatoes, and that is the different rate alternatives and the options for you to consider. Not working. There you go. Got it again. That works? Okay. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about your current rates and rate comparisons. Then I'll quickly go through customers and your cost of service, and then we'll talk about the rate plan alternatives. Okay, what am I doing wrong here? Okay. This button, right? All right. Okay. I think it's very important whenever we talk about rates for decision makers like yourselves to understand what's going on in the marketplace, because a lot of the factors and a lot of the reasons why rates go up over time are reasons that are outside your control. They're outside the control of the board of directors. They're outside the control of the staff, because it involves larger dynamics at work. Water industry is changing. I mean, keep in mind one very important factor about the water industry. We have 6 billion people on the planet today. We had 1 billion people 100 years ago, but we've got the exact same amount of fresh water. So for that reason, the water is becoming a more precious and diminishing natural resource. At the same time, we have a lot of standards that are imposed on you by federal authorities that increase the cost of producing and treating water. As a result, the average utility across the United States has been increasing its rates 5 to 6% every year to deal with this. You're not the only district looking at increasing costs. These costs are going up for everybody. As a matter of fact, the American Water Works Association projects that water and sewer rates are going to triple across the United States in the next 15 years. And again, there's a lot of reasons for this. Inflation is one reason. Cost of everything goes up by 2 to 3% a year. And you try to run your water operation like a business. When costs go up, you've got no choice but to pass those costs through to your ultimate ratepayer. And when inflation goes up and the cost of gasoline goes up and chemicals and electricity goes up, all of that is passed through to the ultimate cost of providing water service. Now, whenever we talk about water and wastewater rate comparisons, and it's a very common topic in presentations like this, try to keep in mind the fact that 30 to 40% of utilities across the United States have rates in place that don't cover their costs. What that means is there are many cities out there, many municipal water operations, where cities have decided that they're going to subsidize their water rates with their general fund. Now, what does that mean? It means their water rates are low. It also means that their taxes are higher because they're subsidizing their water and sewer operation. So there's a lot of factors at work, and it's not uncommon that you hear the complaint from a ratepayer or a citizen that, you know what, if you just ran your operation more efficiently, we wouldn't need any of these rate increases. Well, that's not happening around the rest of the country. I happen to think you run a pretty tight ship here, but costs are going to be more tomorrow than they are today. That's a common fact of life. So, that's what's going on in the general industry. Let's talk about the district itself. Your residential rates right now, on average, are about 40% below the state average. I think that speaks very well for the district itself. You haven't done a rate adjustment since 2016, the last couple of years. Many cities increase their rates every year. And furthermore, you put a rate structure in place that for the most part has really encouraged conservation, because as I'll show you on the subsequent chart.
Dan, let me stop you.
Sure.
District's monthly residential rates are 4
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now, the state average also includes those water supply districts that are part of the city.
Yes, correct.
So those rates are low to begin with.
Exactly right. Mm-hmm. And that's an advantage the city has that you don't have, because the city can subsidize their rates with their general fund. You can't.
But that nets you our 40%, wouldn't we actually be more below the national state average because other cities' rates are subsidized municipal?
I think that's a very reasonable point to make. But the problem is it's virtually impossible to come up with that calculation.
The apple to apple right now.
Right.
We need to know there's a worm in the apple.
Yeah.
That we're comparing to.
That's the problem with rate comparisons. There are a lot of worms in the apple. But I think what you say makes a lot of sense. And I think that's definitely true. So, let's talk about your rates themselves. This is your current rate structure. As you can see, you charge a base rate and a usage rate by meter size at present. For your 5/8 inch meters, which is your typical residential customers, you charge a base charge of $12.26, and and you get the first 4,000 gallons in that base charge. You then charge a usage charge of $2.47 per 1,000 gallons for between 4 and 10, $3.89 per 1,000 gallons for between 10 and 20, and $5.55 per 1,000 gallons for above 20,000 gallons. Wastewater rate has a similar rate structure, and as you can see, the rates are slightly different for the larger meter sizes, because in general, the cost of providing service to the larger meters is a little higher because they exert a greater demand on your system, particularly the hotels and the other complexes that have very, very high seasonal averages. So what does that mean in terms of what people pay? An average ratepayer here in the Laguna Madre Water District right now only uses about 6,000 to 7,000 gallons of water a month. Typically, when you do these rate comparisons, you do it for 10,000 gallons. That's the data that's generally available around the state. The Texas Municipal League does an average for all cities, and they base it on 10,000 gallons. So I base this comparison on 10,000 gallons. As you can see here, somebody who uses in the district, a residential customer that uses 10,000 gallons a month, pays $50.10 for that service. Now, that doesn't include sales taxes or anything else. It's just the basic cost of water and sewer service. As you can see, that's about $37 below the state average. The state average is $87.58 for that same amount. Now, again, it's 10,000 gallons. There are some cities that artificially keep their rates low for 10,000 gallons. Let's look at, for example, at the city of Plano. Plano is a very wealthy community in North Texas, but they have a rate where they charge for their first 10,000 gallons of service only 65 cents per 1,000 gallons. And so, if I put Plano up here, they'd be way below even you. So they can say, hey, look at how cheap our rates are. What they don't tell you is that if you get above about 20,000 gallons, they charge you about $8. And also, they have a very strong commercial base, and their commercial rates are really high. So you can manipulate these numbers. That's why rate comparisons can be very, very risky, and they're very, very incomplete as well. Keeping that in mind, this is a comparison of monthly charges for residential customers for 10,000 gallons in the Laguna Madre Water District with several other valley area cities. As you can see, you're about where you would expect to be. You're higher than the cities, and you're lower than many other cities. And an example Mr. Houston brought up about other cities, let's take a look at McAllen here. McAllen has a shopping mall that has the highest per capita sales tax of any shopping mall in the United States. It is a serious cash cow for that city. So what they're able to do is they take some of their revenue from the sale from this shopping mall and they use it to subsidize their water rates. So look at McAllen's water rates. Look how low they are. So that's why rate comparisons can be risky. The main reason that I like to do this, though, is not only because it's a question that's always asked, but also, inevitably, the question will be raised is, are what our customers are paying out of proportion to what other customers in the valley are paying and in the state of Texas are paying? And I don't think there's any data that indicates that that's the case. I think you're about where you would expect to be. You know, you're higher than some, you're lower than others, and you're certainly not out of proportion to what people pay for water and sewer service here in the state of Texas. Okay, let's talk just briefly about your customers and your volumes. At present, you've got about 6,700 water customers. We're projecting an average growth of about 50 accounts a year. That gets you about 7,200 customers in the next 10 years. That's a pretty conservative rate. I mean, you could grow a lot faster than that, and if you do, that will be very beneficial to your long-term rate plan. This right here is a chart that shows your usage over the last 15 or so years. As you can see, in 2005, you sold, this is water consumed, not water produced. In 2005, in 2005, you sold about 1.1 billion gallons of water. Their highest sales year ever was 2011, which you might recall was a very, very dry year. In that year, you sold 1.5 billion gallons. And since then, your numbers have come way down to the current year, where you're only selling about 1.2 billion gallons of water. We're projecting this amount will stay fairly steady, and that's what you do in a long-term financial forecast, because you can't really predict the weather. So the reality is, over the next 10 years, the numbers are probably going to go up some years and down other years and up. But I think for the most part, it's going to stay fairly steady over the next 10 years.
Sir, just a brief comment on that particular graph. Right after 12, 13, right around 15 is when we see that big drop right there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Would the fact that that's the last time in 16 is when the rates were increased, would that have any impact on that?
It could. I mean, there's an old principle that says if you raise the price of something, you get less of it.
Okay.
And so when costs go higher, it's natural to assume that usage is going to dip a little bit. So I think that clearly.
And that's to be expected in any particular model.
Yeah.
Okay.
And our model takes that into consideration. Our model has an algorithm in it that when you raise the rate, the general rule of thumb is that for every 10% increase in rates, you're going to see a 1% decline in consumption. Now that's very general, but our model kind of takes that into account, that the higher you raise the rate, the less the volume is going to be. See, you're in kind of a funny business here. Water business is unique in that you're producing and trying to sell a product that you're trying to get your customers not to buy because you want them to conserve. So by raising the price, you're accomplishing an objective. You're getting people to conserve. But it can also work against you because it means you get less revenue. So it's very difficult. I mean, it's a balancing act.
Right.
So, this right here is a chart that shows for your residential customers historical use per account per month. Back in 2001, the average district customer used about 8,000 gallons a month. And it went up and down a little bit, but as you can see, by 2005, it was about 8,700 gallons a month. In 2011, the drought year, it spiked up to about 11,000 gallons a month. But since then, in the more normal years, more recently, your average has only been about 6,000 gallons a month. So we can certainly see that over the last 5 years, as you've encouraged conservation and as you've raised your prices a little bit, usage has come down. And again, it's a good thing for the community, but it is also something that has to be taken into consideration when you set long-term financial policy as well. Okay, so let's talk just real briefly about your cost of service. I want to really emphasize that at this point in time, your fund balance is in very sound condition. You know, you have a well-run utility, you have a financially sound utility. However, that being said, right now, your water rates are recovering a little bit more than their costs, and your wastewater rates are recovering a little less than their costs. It's not real significant, but it is there, and it's not uncommon either. It's very common in utilities. I mean, in a perfect world, you want water rates to cover their costs exactly and wastewater rates to cover their rates exactly, but we don't live in a perfect world, and that doesn't always happen. It's not a significant imbalance, but it is there. You do have a sound balance right now, but one of the challenges of running a water utility is that as costs continue to go up, if you don't stay on top of it, your water fund will not be in sound condition in future years. It's one of those things where you've done a great job so far, but you've got to stay on top of it, and that does mean that you have to modestly adjust your rates on occasion to ensure that your fund balance stays in sound condition. This is your current cost of service, as you can see. Your water revenues were about, in the current fiscal year, your water revenues are projected to be $5.4 million, and your wastewater revenues $3.6 million, for a total of about $9 million. This is just rate revenue. Doesn't take into consideration any of your tax funds. This is just rate revenues. And as you can see, your water cost of service is a little bit less than your total, and your wastewater cost of service is a little more than your total revenue. That's why I say that there's a very, very slight imbalance there. I hope I don't accidentally zap you with my thing here. All right. This is what this is the chart I wanted to point out to reinforce the point I made a little earlier.
Let me stop you for a second. Our wastewater costs are significantly less than our water costs, our water rates per se.
Right.
Is that balance normal, abnormal? What is the typical ratio of that?
As you can see right here, your water and wastewater cost of service is about equal, about
Right.
4.3 to 4.5 million.
But the revenues are considerably
right.
different.
And the reason is that you sell more water service than you do wastewater service. You have
There's more expense in the wastewater service than there is.
Yeah, there is. That's getting to be the point now, because wastewater costs in the industry in general have been rising at a much greater rate than water costs. Wastewater treatment plants, producing effluent, that kind of thing. The cost of providing wastewater have gone up at a greater rate in general than the cost of providing water service. Think about it this way. You have a bucket, let's say I'm holding a bucket in my left hand and my right hand. In my left hand I have a bucket of raw water, and in my right hand I have a bucket of raw sewage. Which one do you think costs more to treat? And that's what we're facing right now. Your costs of treating wastewater have become a lot more expensive. And on top of that, you don't sell as much wastewater service as you do water. Because first of all, wastewater is only 75% of water. And secondly, we've got a lot of water irrigation accounts that don't have any wastewater charges that go with it.
Isn't that more volatile also in respect of treating wastewater, because volatile in the sense that you're treating chemicals and other components required of it is volatile in cost.
Absolutely. Very volatile.
You really can't plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why, you always have to build some contingency into any rate plan, because you always have to expect the unexpected, and that's one of the reasons why you have to.
So I guess I'm sorry. One more question. So should we focus a little more? We're focusing on increasing our water rates,
right?
But I don't see much of a focus on increasing our wastewater rates.
This plan does recommend increases in wastewater rates as well.
But they still are not proportioned, though, I guess.
No. The plan that we project,
maybe I'm jumping ahead. I'm
sure.
sorry.
Sure. The plan that we project here takes about 5 to 7 years to eliminate the undercollection of wastewater. Now, you could do it overnight if you wanted to, but it would be a very, very significant wastewater rate increase, and it might be something that would not be considered to be acceptable.
If we're losing money, we gotta address it.
Huh?
If we're losing money, we have to address it.
Well, here's the deal.
Prolong the pain 5 years.
That is
and
true.
lose more money. You know, we're 5 years, we're losing 3.2 million.
That's exactly right. But right now, your water rates are carrying your wastewater. And so you could take a very radical approach. You could do a big increase on your wastewater, and you could lower your water rates. You could do that if you so choose. That would be disruptive, because what would happen is some of your wastewater customers, particularly your lower volume residential customers, would see a much bigger increase in their monthly bills, and some of your high volume water customers would actually see a significant decrease in their bills. But that is an option.
But that's only considering a static capital outlay and static debt service that we're trying to get out of debt. And we want to go ahead and improve the infrastructure of the district.
Right.
We can't be thinking in terms, I can't be thinking in terms that, well, we're just going to ease into this and just kind of think that we're breaking even, when in fact, in my opinion, the district is sliding behind in its overall efficiency with the infrastructure that we have.
And yeah, I understand your point. What this plan does over the 5-year period is it ratchets down the surplus in water from 1.1 million down to, I don't remember the exact number, while it eliminates the wastewater deficit. So by the end of the 5-year period, water is just about covering its costs, and wastewater is just about covering its costs. So you do have water rate increases, but they're less than the cost of water service.
But again, isn't that assuming that our capital outlay is going to be what you're showing there? And it's not an increase in capital outlay. For us to have an increase in capital outlay, we got to have more money.
And if you assume that you're going to be spending more in capital outlays, then you would have to do larger increases. But
that's breaking.
Yeah, it is. Your capital outlays in wastewater right now are over 10% of your cost of service. That's a pretty healthy amount of capital outlays. What this also does, however, though, is this plan assumes that you're going to issue some long-term debt to do other major capital improvements. So there's a lot of capital structure improvements in this plan.
I see a pretty conservative prediction on long-term debt.
It's something for you to take into consideration. I mean, and always keep in mind, I mean, you can issue more debt.
That's our job.
Yeah. And if you decide that the debt numbers in this study and in the projection aren't high enough and you need more debt, then we can certainly build that into the plan. But it would mean higher rate increases.
Well, I think, I feel that we could address that at the proper time. I just want to think that that's something we want to have more discussion about when we're considering any kind of rate adjustment.
Absolutely. I mean, capital spending is always the biggest single impact on rates. How much you spend on capital outlays, when you have to spend it, and how do you finance it. And those are board decisions. And once the board has made the decisions on what they want those capital expenditures to be, heck, the rates are just arithmetic. You know, it's just, okay, now you've told us how much money you need to make, here's the rates that'll get you that money. But the challenge you have as a board is to balance how much you want to spend with how much you think the ratepayers are going to be willing to pay. Heck, you could spend $40 million on capital improvements if you're willing to raise the rates high enough. So, but like every other business, like every other household, you have to balance what you wanted to, what you need to spend with what you're willing to pay. You know, like if you own a house, you know, there's always a list of things that have to be done in a house: replacing the roof, redoing the kitchen, putting in new floors. You may not have the money to do all of that, and so you have to prioritize what's the most important projects to do. How much do I want to do? And rate making is kind of the same thing. You know, you've got a lot of projects that you could potentially do, and so you need to balance what you want to do with how much you're willing to spend.
Let me ask you a question. Recently we had a bond issue that failed. And in that bond issue it was to have covered a myriad of things that we were told by most most part, that they were needed. They needed to be done. With the failure of the bond issue and the failure of those funds coming from taxes, now those funds are gonna need to come from rates.
That's right.
And it's unfair, and people don't realize that, you know, they think by voting against the taxes, I'm gonna save some money, but basically what it does, it just shifts the burden.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, it does. That's, I mean, so, you're right, I mean, turning down a bond issue doesn't mean the projects don't need to be done. They still need to be done. It just means that you as a board need to figure out another way to pay for it. And you as a community need to find another way to pay for it.
Okay, I didn't mean to derail the conversation, I'm sorry.
Oh, I can talk all day. Let me just skip ahead, because I really want to get to the rate alternative. One of the issues I did want to mention to you, that in this revised plan, we did take into consideration the question you brought up, Mr. Wells, the one about the unfunded pension liability. The unfunded pension liability right now, depending on who you talk to, is somewhere between $2 and $2.5 million. If nothing's done, it's going to continue to climb a little bit in the next several years. So what we did, for the purposes of this analysis, is that we assumed that over a 10-year period, beginning in 2019, you would begin to set aside about $300,000 a year to eliminate that unfunded liability. It will take you time. It's going to take you 8 to 10 years to do it. But what it has done is it has increased your cost of service by $300,000 a year, and it means that the rate adjustments that we're going to show you now are a little higher than what I showed you a month ago.
And we've effectively done that, correct me, Mr. Delmont, haven't we effectively done that when the state increased our percentage that we have to pay back to do kind of a catch-up? So
Yes.
on a small level, we have started kicking that in. Apart
That
from
is correct.
what I'm going to say, do a line item as far as the payment of it.
Yes, and I know that we did contact our pension company, and they're gonna come meet with us after July the 20, around the 25th of July, so they can and explain that type of payback. You know, I think it takes like about 20 years to completely pay everything back by raising the percentages.
We bump it 110,000, what he's talking about 300, we bumped it 110.
What's the percentage?
Huh?
The percentage that they're paying.
But that percentage worked, according to what's her name, the percentage worked out to about another 110,000 a year that we
Yes.
were contributing.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
Right.
And we're at 14.27%.
But
which is
for this presentation, the 3 million, and whether it comes from the 110 or whatever else we're doing, it's still got to come from somewhere, and that's
Yes.
still from revenue from the district, and that's what we're discussing.
That's correct. And if anything, it'll shorten the length of time if
Yeah.
we continue to have it on the
Well,
rates.
Not to get a sidebar again, but I'd like to look at that because we're catching up, and there's a cost of doing that. And so if we can figure out a way to go ahead and take the bull by the horns and go ahead and eliminate that debt liability, that comes into our conversation of proper rate structure that we're going to have to pay.
Right. And once you complete the payoff, I mean, you can always go back and, look at the rates again and reduce or stay the same.
Yeah.
You can make adjustments.
The idea of this plan is it's a 5-year plan. You put it in place, it becomes your sort of default option. You still have the right, at any time you choose, to go back in and review the plan and adjust it if necessary. So that if your unfunded liability payments turn out to be not as high as what was anticipated, then you can adjust the rate plan. If your debt turns out to be not as much as what you thought, you can adjust the rate plan.
Yeah, I understand that, but just when we're going to be discussing a rate plan, thanks to your information, we've got to take all of this into consideration. The unfunded liability, whatever it is, along with our capital improvements, everything that we need to do, and get trucks that are losing bumpers.
Right, right.
Need bumpers.
Okay, so let's talk about your debt issues. This is the assumptions that we're using for the purposes of the next 5 years, the 5-year plan. We're assuming that you'll be issuing about $10.5 million of debt. Now, 5 of it you're already in the process of issuing, but then another $5.5 million in debt in the next 5 years. And keep in mind, if you choose to issue more revenue bond debt than that, then that would impact the rate plan as well. But these are the assumptions based on our discussions with staff and our analysis of your capital requirements. And, you know, obviously, if at some point you tell us that these numbers need to be revised, we can revise them accordingly. So, this is your total cost of service. Your total cost of service goes from $8.7 million in the current year up to about $11.7 million in 2022. Operating costs go up, debt service goes up. As you can see, debt service more than doubles over the next 5 years as you issue the new debt. And so, your cost of service is this amount, and of that, you have 2 sources of revenue. One is your rate, and the other is what's called non-rate revenue. And that's things like late payment penalties, turn-on fees, turn-off connections. This is only the revenue side of the equation. It doesn't take into consideration any of your tax debt, because this is a rate study, not a tax study. So as you can see, the net amount of revenues you have to recover from your rates do go up over the next 5 years, and that's why we're recommending the alternative rate plans that we're going to show to you tonight. So we've got 2 alternatives. One alternative rate plan is what we call the status quo. It just says basically we think the rate structure that we have right now is fair, just, and reasonable, and we're going to do a series of percentage increases on all customers, water and wastewater, in order to get the revenue that we need. The second alternative is what we call the multifamily alternative, and that's the alternative that takes your multifamily accounts and reclassifies them into a separate class. Right now, all of your customers are billed one minimum charge based on meter size. What this alternative does is it takes those accounts that are multifamily and it puts them into a separate rate class, and then it charges a residential monthly minimum charge to each unit in the complex.
Like a door charge.
Yeah, that's a good way to
We
start
used
it.
to have one of those.
Yes, we did.
Someone that went away, I don't know why.
It went away in the early 1990s. Yeah, you had it in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And it was decided by a prior board that they wanted a rate that was just based on meter size. And that was, if I recall correctly, it was in the 91, 92 time frame. I think it was. Do you remember? Y'all remember? Sometime around then, I think it was. But what this does is basically goes back to the way it was done in the 70s and 80s. And I'll describe a little bit more in detail. But what I want to point out to you, though, is that both of these alternatives are revenue neutral. And as your rate consultant, I'm just presenting you the alternative. It's up to you as a board to determine which one you think is the most fair, just, and reasonable rate plan. In other words, I'm just a numbers guy. So, this is the first alternative. I apologize for the fact that these numbers are kind of small, but I'll first show you the rates themselves, and then I'll show you the more important chart, which is the impact on monthly residential and non-residential customers. Under this plan, as you can see, you would do a series of staged adjustments for each of your water customers under each meter size. Everybody would pay a percentage more each month. The same thing is true with your wastewater customers. As you can see, 5A, 1, 2, 4, and 6. Each of those would go up by a certain amount. Now, I won't rattle off all the numbers, but what I will show you is what does this mean in terms of the impact on monthly charges. Okay. If you're a residential customer, you're a 5/8 inch meter. Most of your 5/8 inch meter customers are residential. A couple of businesses, mostly residential. Most residential customers use 10,000 gallons or less. The average is about 6,000 gallons. So what that means is, from a mathematical standpoint, about 70 to 80% of your monthly residential bills are going to be 10,000 gallons a month, or less in a month. So if you're a 5,000 gallon user, right now you pay $30.24 for that service. Under this plan, your bill would go up by $4.13 a month to $34.37 in the first year. In the second year, it would go up by $3.66 a month. In the third year, $2.08. In the fourth year, $1.19. If you're a 10,000 gallon
Well,
user,
why is it going down?
because what?
Why isn't it the same? I mean, the same $2, whatever.
Because, well, let me refresh my memory, but my recollection.
Following your question, or what was your?
Well, I mean, the first year is $4 increase, the next year it's $3 on top of the 4,
Mhm.
and the, rather an average of $2.50 increase every year. The first year the increase is $4, and then it goes to 3, then it goes to 2, and then it goes to 1.
Right. Because what's happening is you're increasing the wastewater rates a little higher in the first couple of years to eliminate that deficit.
All right.
And then once you get to the point where the deficit is almost eliminated, then the wastewater increases can come down, and they can just be cost of living based increases.
All right, so this is water and wastewater.
Water and wastewater, that's correct.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. Now, you could smooth it out. You could, but what that means is you carry the wastewater deficit a little longer.
Okay, so the way I understand it, the
Mhm.
reason it's lopsided is basically because of the wastewater deficiency.
Right.
And we're trying to get that evened out.
Over a 4 to 5 year period. And most of it is in the first couple of years. So, but there are utilities that decide that they want a $3 increase every year. And that's an easier sell for the ratepayers, and you can certainly do that. It would mean that you would carry the deficit a little longer though. So, 1 inch meter, the average usage for 1 inch meter is 25,000 gallons. As you can see, they pay $152 a month for that. Under this plan, it would go up by about $19.75 a month in the first year, and then $16.87 in the second year, and then lesser amounts in the third and fourth year. And for the higher meters, the percentages are about equal for each of the higher meters as well. 2 inch meters, 4 inch meters, and 6 inch meters. Higher adjustments in the first couple of years, and then lesser adjustments in the third year. But basically the same percentage increases for each customer in each of the 4 years of this plan. So, that's the first one. That's the alternative where you decide the way we're doing it right now is fine. We're not going to make any major changes. Alternative 2 is the alternative where on the water side, the wastewater, on the water side, you reclassify your customers into this multifamily rate. Because the door charge based on the number of units in each complex. Each unit would be charged the 5/8 inch meter minimum charge, and each unit would get a credit of 4,000 gallons a month. The intent is to the best extent possible, treat the multifamily or condo customers the exact same way you treat the residential customers. And that's what the intent and purpose of a rate plan like this is.
But you're really not if you're only giving them 4,000 gallons of water versus 10,000 gallons of water.
No, the minimum charge is 4,000. On residential 5/8 inch meters, the gallon credit for the minimum charge is 4,000 gallons.
But it's 10,000 for a standard homeowner.
No, it's 4,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, you're right, I misunderstood.
Yeah, the average total they use a month
You're right,
is somewhere
you're right.
around 10,000, but 4,000 is the base. Okay, so let's talk about this because you have a lot of condo complexes here on the island, and the imposition of a rate structure like this will impact different condos differently. You have, by our count, you have approximately 211 multifamily accounts. And first of all, I want to give a shout out to Minnie because she spent a lot of time putting all this data together for us, and I really appreciate the great job she did putting it together. But we've come up with about 211 multifamily accounts. Of these 211 accounts, 50% of them have 10 units or less. And 80% of them use 4,000 gallons per unit or less in a month. Those are 2 very important numbers for you to keep in mind. At the same time, this rate structure would be fairly complicated because you do have some complexes that have multiple meters. You have some that have more than one meter. And so, the data that I present you, I really want to emphasize this. The numbers are very preliminary. As much work as has been done, if you decide you want to go through with a multifamily rate, we would strongly recommend that before you do so, you do a comprehensive audit of all your multifamily accounts. That would include having district personnel go to contact every single multifamily account and at least try to get from them a certification of how many accounts or how many units they have in their complex. Because what you want to make sure is, if you put in a policy like this, you want to make sure that you're charging them for the exact number of units they have. And surprisingly enough, there can be instances where you have a dispute with a condo complex about how many actual units they have. You would think the number was straightforward, but I've seen with other clients in the past where there actually can be some dispute about how many accounts they have. So the way to avoid that is you get a signed piece of paper from every condo complex saying, I, owner's name, hereby attest that there are 50 units in my apartment complex. And so that's what you charge it based on. Now, the question can come up is, what if somebody doesn't sign the paper? What if a condo complex doesn't want to do that? Well, if they don't do that, then you've got no choice but to use district personnel to estimate the number of units. And you know what, you all know your area pretty well. You probably can figure out how many condos are in each, yes, sir?
Go ahead. When you're done, I have a question.
Okay. You can probably figure out how many condos there are in each.
I have another
complex.
question too.
Okay.
What's first?
Yours first.
You first.
Oh, me? Are you ready?
Better.
Absolutely.
Okay, on this type of multifamily, you're only gonna have 1 meter, right? And you're gonna be charging the 4,000 minimum to everybody.
Right.
But, there's gonna be people that use more water on certain occasions, like 1 month or another.
Right.
And you don't know who's using more
Right.
water than the other one, right? Because
No,
it's
you
only
don't.
1 meter.
Right.
So that means that the whole estimate, each month, we're gonna have to just divide it by 10 units, let's say 10 units.
No, not
Or-
necessarily. You're still charging just the condo.
Yes,
Okay?
right,
You're still sending out one bill to the condo.
correct.
But what you're doing is, let's say you have a condo that has 20 units, and they use...
Okay, 20 units.
And they use 200,000 gallons in a
Okay.
month. What you do is you send a bill out to them that has 20 units times 4,000 gallons, and their minimum allowance is 80,000 gallons. And so they pay for 120,000 gallons for water.
Right.
The minimum is 80,000 gallons. So the volume rate is based on the 120,000 gallons, which is the difference between how much they actually use and what their minimum was.
Okay.
This is a condo-wide charge, but you're giving 4,000 gallons to every condo within it. So it doesn't matter who the individuals are within the
Or
condo
their
complex.
usage, or their usage.
Right.
Yeah.
All that matters is what the total usage for the condo is.
And that goes to my question.
Well-
My question is that this would apply, we're discussing condos, but there are areas in our district that we have multi-use of 1 meter.
Mhm.
Or trailer parks,
It would-
mother-in-law cabins, and so
Yeah.
it's not just the higher end, but it would address the area that we're thinking of doing, to where those that are absentee and they're not using the water, and we're only billing it on what they're actually using, but yet our infrastructure to make that water available to turn on when they come back is
Mhm.
costing us when they're not there.
Mhm.
And so my question would go back to the areas where, in Laguna Heights, and Fortisville, and trailer parks, and other areas where we have 1 meter, but there's several
Right.
different doors, if you will, using that same meter, but I'm going to assume that the majority of all those doors are using services.
Right.
Using water.
Right.
So this would still be fair and equitable to them,
Mhm.
because they're still, paying for their services because they're taking the services.
Right. Every multifamily unit would be subject to the charge. It could be a condo complex with 100 units. It could be a duplex with 2 units. Or it could be a trailer park. All of them would qualify to be charged under this program.
or I have a,
Can of worms.
like, yeah, where do you draw the line between commercial, like a hotel versus permanent?
Okay, hotel, now that's an interesting, very interesting. There are some business clients I have that charge hotels based on the room. That's a really, really difficult thing to do though. Because what a hotel owner is gonna come up to you and say is, you know what? Well, my hotel is empty 4 months of the year, so why are you charging me per room? Now, the answer is because the water has to be available, whether you use it or not, but let's see how well they take that.
Same as the condo.
You could expand it to hotels if you so choose. The argument isn't as solid. If it's a condo, it is a residential living unit. If it is a hotel, it is a business that rents out rooms by the day. There are arguments that say it's similar, there are arguments that say it's different.
Yeah, I'm familiar with City of South Padre Island, having worked for the city for many years. There's a lot of condos that act like hotel rooms.
Right.
They rent out their unit as hotels. So I think defining what is the hotel and what is the condo, who decides? Is it the person standing behind the front desk, or is it you know, who's going to say? Because I think that you're going to have some challenge there. You know, some people may say that they're a hotel and not a condo.
Good question, good point. I think ultimately it's the district that will decide. I mean, you know your district, and a condo complex that rents out, where people rent out rooms, is still a condo complex.
Yes.
But a hotel is by definition a place where people don't live. They just stay for a night or two. So I mean, you can make a logical distinction between a hotel and even a condo complex that rents out their rooms.
But for our purpose, we're not defining a hotel or a condo, we're just defining useful space and what is demand on the district at the time they want services from us. So what I'm getting from you here is that this option 2 is an option, but just like we've got all this conversation now, we've got a lot of details that we're going to have to really explore before we jump into it. And then my other thought question is that we can proceed with option 1 at any time now. And we can still explore option 2.
You should win option 1 and 2.
Yeah, but
reality.
we can go into a rate adjustment now under option 1, and then go ahead and take the time to explore the everything that you've outlined in bold here that we need to do if we're going to consider that.
That clearly is an option for you. I mean, I wanted to include, I know this is a lot of detail, I wanted to include it because, you know, this is a very unique community in the sense that you've got so many condos and you've got hotels and you've got this very, very rigorous tourist industry, and making this change would be a significant change. That doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do, but what it does do is it means that it's going to impact different people in different complexes differently. And so if you're going to do that, it's important that you understand all the ramifications of doing that. And that's why I wanted to put in a couple of these additional charts, just to give you a little bit more information. This chart right here shows you that there's 211 condo complexes. Of that, half of them have 10 units or less. 50 of them, 25% of them have between 1 and 5 units. As you see, 75% of them have 50 units or less. There aren't that many huge condo complexes, but there are some. And they're big water users. Here's probably the more important chart. And that is what's the usage per unit per month? Because that's the most important variable in determining what the impact of this conversion will be. As you can see, you have 60 units here. Actually, you have 100 units here that use 3,000 gallons or less. Half of the 211 condo complexes have units where the average usage is 3,000 gallons or less. But you've got some that are really, really big users. You've got some that use, you know, as much as 10,000 gallons a month, and 9,000 and 8,000 gallons. So you've got, just because somebody lives in a condo doesn't mean they don't use a lot of water. So there are some that do.
A lot of condos have 4 bathrooms.
So here's the deal. What matters in making this conversion, the most important factor is the average usage per unit in that given condo complex. And here's the general rule of thumb. If your condo complex right now only uses 1,000 to 2,000 gallons a month per unit, converting to this multifamily rate is going to result in a significant increase in their monthly, in the complex's monthly bill. If the condo complex uses 3,000 to 4,000 gallons a month, the impact of this change will be basically a wash. But if the condo complex uses 5,000 gallons or more, they're going to see their monthly bill go down as a result of this. Now, why is that? Why is that happening? This is why it's happening. What you're doing when you put in this multifamily rate is you're changing out some water that you're charging a volume rate for water you're charging the minimum charge for. You're charging a minimum charge of $12 for 4,000 gallons. That's what's known as the effective rate of $3 per 1,000 gallons. Well, with some condo complexes, they're using so much water that they're hitting the highest volume water rate tier, where they're paying $7 per 1,000 gallons. So if they're high volume condos, they're paying for most of their water at $6 to $7 per 1,000 gallons. So you've just taken a big chunk of that water and traded out $7 per 1,000 gallons for $3 per 1,000 gallons. So their bill goes down. But if you're a complex where you're only using 1,000 or 2,000 gallons a month, you're trading out a minimum charge where you're charging them for 4,000 gallons. So their bill goes up. So that's the difference. So that's why the variable is average usage per unit. So you're going to see some people's bills go way up and some people's bills go way down. So I use this right here. I try to, again, I mean, I could show you numbers till the cows come home.
Would you mind going back to that other chart where it shows the percentage of people under 3,000 or under 3,000?
Yeah. These are the people that are going to pay more. These complexes here. These are the people that are basically going to be a wash. And these are the people that are going to get a break.
The high volume.
The high volume users. Because again, because they're high volume users, right now under your current system, most of their monthly charges, most of the water they're buying is $6 to $7 per 1,000 gallons because they're in the highest rate tier.
They're exceeding.
Right, because they're using. I mean, you got a condo with 100 units, and they're using 10,000 gallons of water a month. That's 1 million gallons a month. And all but 950,000 of that 1 million gallons you're paying for at the highest tier. Whereas, if you change that out to a per unit complex, all of a sudden a lot of that is, you've got 100 units, 4,000 gallons, that's 400,000 gallons. Yeah, 400,000 gallons, probably missed a zero there. And they're paying that at $3 a 1,000 gallons instead of $6 to $7. So their bill goes down. So that's why when you do these kind of fundamental restructurings of rates, you know, you're going to impact different people differently. And that's why it's important to kind of go through this and understand these numbers as well as you can. This right here, this chart right here, is an attempt to show you. You take an average, let's take a real small user, okay? 1 inch meter. Guy's got 10 units. Okay, real small unit. If they're only using 1,000 gallons a month, their bill is going to more than double.
But that's not realistic. 1,000 gallons for 10 units, I mean, that's...
No, 1,000 gallons per unit.
Okay, well, that's still...
It's not very much, but you actually have some out there. Maybe it could be a trailer park. I mean, I'm just not sure, but but you do have a few. I would say, but so some you'll see this 10 unit guy, he goes up, he's more than double. Now look, 2,000 to 3,000 gallons, all of a sudden he's still getting an increase, but the increase isn't that much. Now, at 4,000 gallons, well, you know, it's kind of within the margin of error. But even if you're a small guy with only a 1-inch meter and you only have 10 units, if they're big water users, then their bill will go down also. So it all depends. If you have condos that use a lot of water, their bill's going to go down. And I think you're right, Mr. Houston. I just don't, there probably aren't that many 1,000 gallon users, but there probably are some 2,000 and 3,000 gallon users. But they're still going to see a pretty significant increase. But what's really interesting about this is that your big guys, your big users, get the biggest rate under this plan.
Joel had a question back there.
Yeah, that's our question. Sure. I'm seeing 1 inch and 2 inch and largely users. What about the fathers of residential?
Well, I'm not sure you would have any on the,
No, that's what I'm saying. Like from a parent. How does this affect them?
are they in a home?
It's a home.
Yeah, they will see their monthly bills goes up, and as a matter of fact, I'll tell you that in a minute. Now, here's the other thing. There's one other factor here, and that is, by my calculations, if you do the multifamily rate, the amount of people that get a break is greater than the amount of people that pay more. And so the district will actually, their revenues will actually go down a little bit. They'll go down by $500,000. So what that means is you have to do a larger rate increase on your other customers in order to make up that $500,000 difference. So what's happening is the people that get a break get a bigger break than the people that pay more if you convert to the multifamily rate under the current circumstance. Now, there's a way you can mitigate that. You can mitigate that if you lower the if you lower the monthly allowance. Right now it's 4,000 gallons. Take it down to 2,000 or 3,000 per unit. You can mitigate that. Or if you
take it all away.
Huh? Or take it all away. That too. Then you could really mitigate it. Or you increase the minimum charge. But under the current structure you've got right now, if your intention is to charge a multifamily rate that basically mirrors what your residential rate is, you would include the 4,000 gallon monthly minimum allowance. But you don't have to do that. There's no rule that says you have to do that. If you decide, we like the concept of a per unit rate, but given every unit 4,000 gallons, that's a heck of a lot of water to give a condo. So maybe we don't give them that much. So it's something to think about. And then, if you take it down to 2,000 gallons, and you still charge them $12, then all of a sudden you're charging them $6 per 1,000 gallons. And that's just what they're paying right now. So, it's pretty complicated, isn't it?
No. Well, and I think going back to what you mentioned earlier, that a lot of what determines this is going to be what we're actually needing as far as CIP projects.
That's right.
That's what's going to determine whatever increase we make anywhere. Okay.
So, this is the rate structure. I won't go through the numbers, but the rate adjustments on your 5/8 inch, to answer your question, are going to have to be a little higher under this scenario. The impact is that, as you can see, if you're a 5,000 gallon user, 5/8 inch meter, your bill, instead of going up by $4 a month, will go up by $5.77. And if you're a 10,000 gallon user, instead of going up by about $7 to $8 a month, it will go up by $10 a month. So, one of the offshoots of doing the multifamily rate in the current structure is that you would have to have a higher increase on your 5/8 inch and your other customers as well. All these adjustments would be slightly higher under scenario 2, the condo complex, or the condo rate, than it would be under scenario 1.
On all the 2 inch and above?
On all.
On all of them?
5/8 inch as well.
Okay.
So let's kind of summarize. What are the benefits and the drop and the challenges of alternative 2? The benefits is you can say that you are treating your multifamily customers exactly the same way as your residential customers. The other advantage is that you're getting more guaranteed revenue, because as you convert to the minimum charges, that's revenue you get whether people use the water or not. So it's more guaranteed revenue. The challenges is that, as I said several times before, you're going to have some people see big increases and some people see decreases, and some people may consider that not to be fair. The other drawback or the other challenge is that under alternative 2, you would have to have a slightly higher rate increase on your non-condo customers to make up the revenue difference. And the third challenge is, it will be a challenge to implement, because it's gonna require a lot of staff work to identify the condos, identify how many units are in every condo, and get the billing system set up so that you can start making the charge in that manner. Okay, final topic, the raw water rate. This is the raw water rate that reimburses the district for the raw water transportation costs to water treatment plant number 2. Now, we had a conversation, Mr. Houston and I did at the last meeting, about what is a fair and reasonable rate to charge raw water customers. Should we just recover our costs, or are we entitled to, I don't want to call it a profit because you're a nonprofit organization, but are we entitled to make a return on the investment we make? You as a district have taken a significant risk in building that raw water line. When other customers want to use it, you're entitled to be compensated for that risk. It's standard rate making policy. It's called a rate of return. So, what I did is, after the meeting, is I went back and I recalculated the numbers and I added what's called a rate of return. Again, it's not a profit, but what it does is it compensates you for the risk, investment, and challenge you went through in developing that raw water line. So, by adding that to the cost, you end up with a raw water rate of about $1.04 per 1,000 gallons.
Backing up, the cost you talk about as far as the cost of actually being able to provide the transportation or
right.
providing the raw water, that's from the cost of what you've already invested, or is it taking a factor of what you're going to need to maintain and improve that infrastructure?
Yes and yes.
Okay, thank you.
What we did is, your budget allocates your costs to raw water line, transmission, treatment, distribution, and administration. And our model does that as well. And then, on top of that, we added the rate of return at 6%. While it's not a profit, what it does is it compensates you for the risk you undertook. Because, in other words, it's like you've taken all the risk in building this line. If somebody wants to buy water from it, they should pay you more than just what your costs were, because they're not taking any risk. A golf course or whoever buys raw water from you, they didn't take any risk in building it, and if something happens to that line, it ain't their problem.
We all pay electric service, electric provider a fee for the electricity. At the same time, we also pay the transmission upkeep of that line to somebody else, the EP in our area.
Right.
And so that's just an added cost for the overall cost of providing that. So is that 6% industry standard? Where does that 6% come from? Is that adequate?
It represents your basic cost of capital with what's called a risk premium. A risk premium is typically about 3%. And your weighted average cost of capital, in other words, the cost of debt you're having right now, is somewhere around 3% as well. So I just added the 2 3s together, came up with 6%. You could make it higher if you wanted.
That was your number that you put in there.
Yeah, that was.
You felt comfortable with.
That's the number I felt most comfortable with. But if you could justify a higher number, I think the way private water companies have a return of 12%. And 12% is pretty aggressive. I mean, you put a 12% in there, you're talking about $1.50 to $2 per 1,000 gallons.
And sitting on this side of the table, I'm recalling that we just spent a whole bunch of money on pumps that we had or motors that we had to replace to deliver that. And so
there are operating costs.
I'm thinking that we have to be cognizant of that.
Right.
We got to have
80 cents going, we bumped to 80 cents.
So the 6%, could it be considered
It's at 80 now.
like part of the future replacement cost for that?
Absolutely,
Okay.
It is compensation for the risk you're taking in building the line and providing that service. And what you do with the money is,
not just for risk, but the upkeep and maintenance of it.
Yeah, because that's already in the rate. There's two elements to the rate. One is the cost that you incur, and the other is the return you get. So the return's on top of
We
the
have the
cost.
cost of the product, we have
Right.
the cost of
Right.
transport, and we have the cost of maintaining that.
Right.
And the infrastructure to deliver it
Right.
to the customer.
Mhm.
And that's the part that you're talking about.
Right. And then you,
Return on top of that.
right,
And then your return on that is gonna take and give you
Yeah.
the reinvestment.
right.
Enjoying, collecting, and.
Mhm.
Yes,
So-
I mean, that's our cost of the administration.
So, once again, my recommendation is 6%, because I think that's just and reasonable. However, you as a board set policy, and you have the right, if you determine that the rate of return should be higher, you're more than welcome to put it in. So, at 6%, right now, your rate, at least at this time, is 55 cents, it would result in a rate of about $1.04. And actually, it stays pretty steady over the 4 years, because you see, the rate of return is based on your asset, based on the value, the net value of the line. And the net value of the line actually goes down over the years because of depreciation. And so what happens is your rate of return slightly goes down and your operating costs slightly go up, and it kind of offsets each other. It's going to trend up over time, but $1.04 I think is very defensible for the next few years. Now, I know I said this was the last part, but now I really mean it. This is the last part. This is the infrastructure rate. One final thing for you to think about is, and it's something we talked about last meeting, and that is the idea of having a separate charge or rate that is totally devoted for paying for infrastructure projects. Many utilities do this. I work for a lot of utilities out in Arizona, and they like to have what's called a water resource charge. What they do is they charge every bill $4 or $5 a month or something like that, and it's called a water resource fee because water resources are so scarce out in Arizona. It costs a lot of money to develop new water resources out there. So they put on their bill a separate charge for people to contribute to water resources. This is when an infrastructure rate can do the same thing. You can have a separate line item, and you can set it at whatever you want, whatever you think is appropriate. But that money is set aside and goes into a special fund that is used to build infrastructure. So let's say you set a rate of $5 a month for every customer. You have about 7,000 customers. That's $35,000 a month. That's $500,000 a year. Now you can make it higher for the larger meters. So that way you could get $750,000 a year, something like that. If you set it at $10 a month, it could be over $1 million a year, and that's money that you could go directly into infrastructure projects.
These would be monies available to you outside of indebtedness.
Absolutely.
You just
It's a separate account. It's funds used specifically for whatever you deem to be appropriate.
Growth fund.
It's mostly used for infrastructure, not maintenance and operation.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's a growth fund.
Mm-hmm. You could also set it based on a rate per 1,000 gallons. You could say, we're going to set a 25 cent per 1,000 gallon rate for infrastructure. So what that does is that means the real high volume users would pay a lot more into the infrastructure fund than if you just set a monthly charge for everybody. So I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. That's why this is why rate making is so fun.
Which is where you have the highest cost for maintenance and operation.
Exactly right.
It's on the high users.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say you set it at 50 cents a 1,000 gallons. I mean, if you sell 1 billion gallons a year, that's what, $5 million? But that's also a lot.
Yeah.
50 cents a 1,000 gallons. I mean, somebody who uses 10,000 gallons. I mean, that's adding an extra $5 a month to the bill. Somebody uses 100,000 gallons. That's adding an extra $50 to the bill. So it's the balance. How much money do you want to spend versus what do you think the ratepayers are willing to pay? That's the whole key to rate making.
You could almost say it could offset what you would have gotten if you raised the taxes for the bond issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really it. That's my last chart. So
You could forget bond issues if you put that on there. That would change that story.
At this point in time, you have a lot of options, and you can decide you want to think about this a little bit more and discuss it among yourselves. You could do alternative one for the first year, and then say we're going to think about this more over the next year and decide really what we want to end up doing. You'd go to alternative two.
I think one of the things that we do need to do is to get together with staff and look at what are some of these future projects coming up, the cost of these projects, and then work our way backwards from there. And look at what kind of mechanisms we want to use to raise that money.
This is a Saturday workshop special.
I'm gonna be at my class reunion, by the way.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a Saturday workshop special, it's gonna take more than
3
4
hours.
o'clock.
And then, since capital projects drive rate plans, it's really important that you all be very comfortable with what you think the capital spending needs are before you do a final rate plan. That's what's by far the biggest impact is.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again, I appreciate it.
Great option
Yeah.
you presented.
Thank you.
Lot to think about.
I would recommend, Saturday workshop, the next couple of weeks. I know it's hard, summer's busy, a lot going on, but it's monumental bridge. But obviously you got weeks of lifetime coming up, it's tough. I would say probably.
Could we just try to have another hour of session before our next meeting, just to discuss it a little bit more before we go into a Saturday deal?
I'm good with that.
I mean, well, we can't discuss, it's for a workshop, I guess. I mean, you're looking at probably between $15 and $20 million worth of improvements over the next 10 years. That's just throwing a number up there. And that's how you're working it backwards from there. That's my opinion, based on what you talked about. I'd say at least 15 to 20 million for the next 10 years. An improvement.
Do we need to adjourn from this?
No,
No.
can we continue? I just want to make a comment while we're in open session. I think that if we are going to consider a door charge, that we could take pretty quick, when they can find time, is to see if our Director of Operations and our Finance Director couldn't give us a little bit of a handle on what was reported here in this presentation, referring to what was brought up, the different condos and the numbers. A lot of that information provided to us, but we brought up other questions related to hotels, multi-tenants on the same property, things like that. And by all means, I think that a good example would be outdoor resorts. You know, they're kind of got a couple of meters going now, and so we got a whole bunch of units in there, maybe using any kind of consideration.
The other one, would be, Isla Grande. They do have condos, hotels.
Yeah, and so
vendors.
Sheridan, or
Restaurants.
not Sheridan,
Yeah,
the
restaurants.
Pearl has condotel.
Yeah, things.
all of them do. That's why it's probably better to refer to it as a door charge as opposed to a condo or a hotel. But this is conversation, and I would like some.
My thought on that is.
Just a second. I'd like to get some feedback from staff, and I don't want to overburden you with this right now, but you know, by the next meeting, you know. I think that we can do a lot. My point is, I think we do a lot in-house with the appropriate time.
My thought on that is that, we should at a minimum talk to the city of South Padre and to see about all the troubles they went through to just get to the point where they're trying to identify all the rentals. It is massive. It is a massive undertaking to do that. And it is constantly changing, because you've got people that are selling,
and all that stuff.
instead of creating a door charge, because you got people that are bailing out, some that are coming in. It is constantly evolving. That's month to month. I think doing a door charge is very, very complicated.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I agree totally with that, and that's the information that we need. You know, we don't need to take on a.
South Padre's done a lot of the legwork on it. They have a lot of information, but they don't have it all.
Right, so maybe just kind of give us a little feedback on that. If we're gonna take into considerations, you know, status quo with your outdoor rate increase, or some rate increase, I'm fully in favor of getting wastewater up to flat on the bottom line, as soon as
Well,
possible.
My thinking is along more the lines of, we can adjust the rates to meet our demands, but my thinking is one that we should always think about the fact that the district is responsible for bringing water to your tap, not for you to use it. So, along those lines, I think that we should consider infrastructure more important. You know, of course, we're concerned about how much water is used, and that's where we make our money. But all that profit is going to subsidize the wastewater part, which is the stuff we don't see, the stuff that continues to grow as far as expense. So my responsibility, I feel, is to bring water to you and have it available for you 24/7, not necessarily how much you use, and try to manipulate that. That's my thought on it.
Well, I'd recommend just, Scott, let's just try a 1-hour workshop prior to the next meeting, and then if we need to do a Saturday after that. I'm just reluctant to.
And along those lines,
Here for Saturday.
We do need to get going, in getting this, item, moving forward. We pushed it off.
I support a 1-hour workshop prior to the next meeting.
And put an action item on.
I just wanted to throw in that
I
along.
won't be at the next meeting, but that doesn't matter now.
Maybe we'll get something done.
No, you gotta be yourself.
I just wanted to throw in that along those lines, this is why we guarantee the quality of the water to the tap, not inside the home, okay? It really is important that we pay attention to our infrastructure costs and how we finance that.
With the chairman not being here next meeting, maybe we do it the following meeting?
The meeting.
Yeah, don't make me run a workshop.
Okay, so, are you here
the
the,
meeting?
are you,
What's that?
Can we move the meeting from Wednesday
in
to
July?
Tuesday, or?
We can, actually, I'm gonna be gone, Tuesday, Wednesday, but if you wanna move to Thursday, fine with me.
We can either do
Thursday
it
instead of Wednesday?
We can do it Thursday, or we can do it the following meeting. Are you in town in July?
Yeah, no, I'm here all day. We don't run out
So
that
we
one
can do it
Thursday.
the first meeting in July. Yeah, we can do it the first meeting in July.
I'm good with
How does that work with everybody?
And 1 hour would be sufficient, like
Sure.
four, okay, 4:30
What's
to
our next meeting?
5:30.
Can we adjust that calendar?
14 days from now.
26th is the next meeting. Our next meeting is the 26th, and then the following would be, 2nd and 4th would be the
27th.
11th.
25th,
So we're not meeting the 27th?
Yeah, we're meeting the 27th of June.
Huh?
We're meeting the 27th of June, but you're gone.
Yeah.
So we could meet on the 28th if we wanted to wait for you.
Just have the meeting on the 28th.
Let's do that.
28th. I'm
Yeah.
okay with that. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have a, out of town.
Don't apologize.
You shouldn't get out of the workshop.
So let's move the meeting to the 28th,
That's fine.
and then, I feel that this is very important to go ahead and move forward with something here, because I just don't like operating in the red, nonprofit or not. We just have too many liabilities that we've got
4
to
p.m.
take and make up.
What time?
4 p.m. on the
4:30.
28th. 4:30?
4:30, yeah, 4:30 on the 28th.
Okay, okay.
Or you want more?
I mean, I don't know, a little break in between those two.
I'm fine with that. I'm good.
4:30, doesn't matter.
They're gonna be at 4:30?
Good deal, 4:30.
I move we adjourn.
I'll do it.
Second.
Okay, we're gonna have to adjourn for a workshop, but we'll take a recess and resume the regular meeting at 5:30 p.m. Unless there's any other comments, questions, anyone else have anything they wanna address about the workshop, rate study? No? Okay. We'll resume till the regular meeting, 5:30 p.m.